Okay, so where does that leave us in terms of application? Emerson has told us he believes the universe is divided into two different types of substances. We've talked about that. He says one of the things that he has discovered from his personal experience is that nature is out there. It exists in two different substances, and he wanted to know, why is nature there? Why does it exist? Why does the universe exist? It's a huge question. He gives us an inkling early on in the text that it is possible to achieve a higher state of awareness, a higher state of knowledge, a higher state of consciousness through our contemplation of the Godhead through the vehicle of nature as a conduit, like I said. He then goes back to his original second question, which is, why does nature exist? And he comes up with those four reasons. Towards the end of the text, he explores two or three other concepts or questions that result as or that arise as a result of his first two questions being answered. What's it made of? Why does it exist? Here are four reasons why it exists. He asks this question, which he says is kind of this eternal Western question. Well, does nature actually really exist? I mean, Plato had his doubts, right? Does nature, physical matter exist? Oh, I know. I think I see it and I think I feel it, but maybe there's, it's a phantom. Maybe it's just a mirage. Maybe there is no nature. The only thing that, as Descartes says, that I know is that I have cognition. That I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. This Cartesian reductionism, the Platonic idealism, all these things. There's a long tradition in Western philosophy of asking that question well, if we believe in dualism, that there's nature and then there's spirit, well, does nature even really exist? Is it all just spirit, as Plato says? He says in this section, I have my doubts, but even if it doesn't exist, I do know that the appearance is dependable, and that the appearance of nature, that the sensations I have are real, the impressions I have are real. And even if it doesn't exist, the reality of the impressions tell me that something there wants me to experience. Something out there wants me to experience. Look at how far we've moved away from Lockean epistemology. Look at how far we've moved away from empiricism, where there's this absolute implicit faith or trust in our sensory experiences. Because after all, it's what Locke says all knowledge comes from. Here's Emerson doubting whether nature or the sense, what the senses experience, actually is really there. But he says even if they aren't there, even if this table that I'm knocking on here doesn't exist, even if this computer I'm speaking to doesn't exist that I see in front of my face, even if these things don't exist, certainly the appearances or the impressions of them do. And then I have to ask the question, well, why do the impressions exist? Well, there must be some sort of purpose, cause, design behind it. There must be some reason why they exist. I mean, they don't exist just ex nihilo and for no good reason. And there we go back to the discipline notion of nature as being a teaching, having a teaching function. Then he moves on to the spirit section, and this is where he really gets into the question of why nature, how nature communicates, and how we go through nature to get to God. It's the channel through which we reach the oversoul. And here it also becomes very interesting because towards the end, in this section and then the prospects section, you get a very real sense. Maybe Emerson's being sort of consciously reminding us or consciously alluding to sort of Christian theology. Maybe it's subconscious. Maybe he's unconsciously so imbued with Christian theology that he does this kind of as second nature. Don't know. You can be the judge of that on your own. But clearly, in Emerson's great scheme of things, in his manifesto nature, he believes human beings are fallen. Fallen to the extent that we've become disconnected from spirit or soul, disconnected from the rest of the me out there in the universe. Instead, we are too focused on the material, nature. And we're focused on nature in a very narrow and limited way, that commodity way. This is very romantic, this very romantic idea that somehow human beings have fallen short of our potential. We have not lived up to our potential. We're not living happy lives because we are disconnected from spirit, soul, God, oversoul, whatever you want to call it. and that we have exploited nature and not realized that nature's highest functions are to bring us closer to God, not just to make tables and chairs out of. And so we are fallen. In the prospects section, he says, this is how we redeem ourselves. The individual has to seek salvation through a first-hand experience with the Godhead or the Oversoul. Take a look at what the opening lines of Nature basically said to us. It's quite interesting. I mean, he says, our age is retrospective. It builds the sepulchers of the fathers. It writes biographies, histories, and criticism. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face. We, through their eyes. We are essentially, basically, looking for answers to deep spiritual questions through, according to Emerson, the eyes and experiences of other people, whether they be the Old Testament patriarchs or the church or Shakespeare or whomever. We've got to stop reading everybody else and their experiences of God, according to Emerson, and start going out and directly experiencing God ourselves through nature. Nature is the conduit or messenger. We ourselves are our own messiahs. Our salvation lies in our own destinies, our own choices, that is. And what we want is, according to Emerson, to be able to create an individual, very highly individual connection to the Godhead that second-hand accounts of that sort of relationship are no substitute for. In that opening passage of Nature, he's also making a pitch, in a way, for this new national literature. Remember our literary nationalism point in the last lecture? A new national philosophy, a new national spiritualism. Our age is retrospective. We keep looking backwards. It builds the sepulchers or tombs of the fathers. It writes biographies, which is about other people's lives, histories, which is about other times, and criticism, which is about other literary works. We don't do anything original anymore. We have a new nation, a new people, a new country, a new constitution, a new way of life. We need to have a new literature, and part and parcel of that, and at the bedrock of that is a new philosophy and a new relationship to God. What we don't have is castles and histories and monarchies and chivalry and all of that nonsense. What we do have is nature. And nature is going to be the foundational element that allows us to build a philosophy/religion that will inform the new country's art. That's why Buell says it's probably one of the most important manifestos or statements of American literature.